Velkar 7 was not a normal planet. It was a frozen world, covered in snow and ice storms so strong they could tear metal apart. The sky was always gray, and the winds never stopped. Every year, the Galactic Council held the hunt here, a deadly challenge for the best warriors across the galaxy. Many tried to win the hunt. None survived. The storms would freeze ships, and something in the snow, something no one had ever seen, would always attack. Alien warriors from strong and proud empires came with their advanced gear and massive ships, but all of them were defeated. No one had ever made it out of the White Zone alive. That's why the galaxy called it the Eternal Storm. Then, everything changed. A single human stood in front of the Council's cold, glowing table. His name was Jason Hale. He wasn't a soldier, not a commander, just an explorer who had been to dozens of dangerous places. He didn't speak much. He only said one thing: "I'll try." The aliens laughed. Some called him crazy. Others said he wouldn't last 2 hours, but Jason didn't argue. He just nodded, took his pack, and walked to his old scout ship. It was small and scratched, with dents on its sides and faded paint. But it worked. He landed on Velkar 7 alone. No team, no drones. Just him. The second the ship touched the ground, the snow roared. It was louder than thunder. The wind slammed against the ship like fists, but Jason wasn't surprised. He opened the hatch, stepped outside in his thermal suit, and looked into the white wall of wind. Most warriors would wait inside the ship for hours, trying to study the storm. Jason did not. He walked into it. His boots sank into the deep snow with every step. The cold stabbed his body like tiny knives. The snow wasn't soft. It was sharp, like frozen glass. He pulled his hood tighter, checked his gear, and turned on a small wrist device that showed only his heart rate and direction. No GPS worked. Here, the blizzard blocked every signal. He didn't try to fight the storm. He moved with it. Slow and careful. By the end of the first day, he had gone further than most alien teams had ever gone. He set up a small tent made from heat reactive cloth and dug a hole in the snow to hide it. At night, he didn't sleep much. Strange sounds echoed outside. Heavy steps, scraping claws, and once breathing. Loud, steady breathing, like something massive stood just beyond the snow wall, watching. Jason didn't go out. He stayed still, listening, learning. On the second day, the tent was shredded. Something had slashed through the outer wall during the night. But nothing was taken. Not the food, not the heat cells. Only the sharp cuts in a strange pattern remained. Jason didn't panic. He sat down and sketched the marks in a notebook. Each claw was curved, wide apart, and deep. That meant the creature had huge limbs, but fine control. It wasn't hunting for food. It was testing him. That night, Jason didn't rebuild the tent. He made a snow cave instead and covered the entrance with a heat sheet. He melted snow to drink and ate dried rations. No fire, no lights, only silence. On the third day, he found bones, half buried in the ice. He uncovered the armor of a previous hunter. It belonged to a massive alien from a warrior race. The bones were cracked in half, like dry sticks. But there were no teeth marks, only precision strikes. The same kind of claw marks Jason had seen on his tent. He took the armor's broken blade and tied it to his belt. It might be old, but it was better than nothing. By now, the cold had numbed his fingers. His nose bled from the dry air, but he kept moving forward. He had no plan to turn back. Every few hours, he paused to draw in his notebook every noise, every strange footprint, every gust of wind. He wasn't just walking through the storm. He was trying to understand it. By the end of the third day, something strange happened. A strange signal popped up on his wrist device. Faint, weak. almost like a dying message. Jason stopped, turned toward it, and started walking again. What kind of person would still be alive out here? He didn't know yet. But one thing was sure. Jason Hale was not like the others who came too. Vel Corsovan. He was not here to fight with strength or tech. He was here to learn, to outthink, to survive him, maybe, just maybe. To win the hunt no one had ever beaten. And somewhere deep in the snow, something ancient had started to take interest in him. It was only the beginning, and the blizzard was far from over. Jason Hale walked through the snow slowly, leaving deep footprints behind him. Each step was hard. The wind pushed against his chest like an invisible wall, and the cold air burned his throat when he breathed. But he didn't stop. His eyes stayed focused. He was not just walking in a storm. He was hunting something. Something no one had seen and lived to tell about. His wrist device buzzed now and then, but it couldn't show him much. Velkar 7 storms messed with all kinds of signals. Jason didn't care. He trusted his eyes, his ears, and the weight of his steps. The snow had a rhythm. The wind had a song. And every little change in that rhythm told him something important. On the second night, he built a snow cave again. He dug down deep, shaped the walls with care, and sealed the entrance with his heat-reactive cloth. It felt like being buried. Alive, but it was warm. That was all that mattered. He ate some dried food and drank melted snow. Then he checked his notebook. Jason had drawn the claw marks from the attack on his tent. He compared them to the ones on the crushed alien armor he found the day before. They matched. The creature was big, heavy, smart, but there was something strange. One of the claw marks had stopped halfway through the cut, as if the creature had hesitated. Why? Jason kept thinking about it as he tried to rest. Outside, the storm howled like a wild animal. The wind wasn't just cold anymore. It felt angry, like it knew he was getting closer to something. By early morning, Jason opened the cave and stepped out. Queen. His beard had small bits of ice stuck to it. Queen. His boots were nearly frozen, but he moved on. After an hour of walking, he noticed something strange. A line of footprints in the snow. They weren't his. Jason crouched. The prints were small, lighter than his. 4 toes, sharp edges. Definitely not human. He followed them slowly, staying low and silent. The tracks led to a large rock formation covered in frost. He moved around it carefully, hand on his blade. Then, he heard a faint beeping sound. Not loud, not regular. A slow pulse. Jason stepped closer. Buried under a thin layer of snow, he found a small device flashing weakly. It was a distress beacon, old, covered in Trellan symbols. He recognized the language from his training. That meant someone from the Trellan species was nearby or had been. He picked up the signal and turned up the gain on his scanner. It was coming from the east, just beyond a sharp ridge. Jason moved quickly, but carefully. His eyes stayed sharp and his mind stayed calm. As he climbed the ridge, he saw a small heat signature in the snow, barely alive. He rushed down and found a young alien girl, maybe 10 or 12 years old. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes half closed. She was wrapped in a torn thermal blanket, and her fingers were turning purple from frostbite. Oh, she didn't speak when she saw him. She just stared with fear and confusion. Jason didn't talk either. He took out a heat foil wrap, covered her gently, and checked her pulse. Weak, but steady. Then he lifted her into his arms. She was light, like a bundle of sticks as he turned to head back toward the ridge. Something moved in the snow behind him, a soft crunch. Jason didn't look back immediately. He kept walking, but his hand slid to his blade. His heart beat faster. Crunch, another step, then silence. The thing was following them. Jason didn't run. That would only make them a target. He kept walking until he reached the rock formation again. He hid the girl behind the rocks and set up a small heat shield to protect her. Then he turned around, nothing. The snow was falling harder now, but he knew something was there. He could feel it, watching, waiting. Jason stayed still for a full minute, eyes scanning the white landscape. Then he saw two eyes glowing faintly in the snow mist. Not red, not yellow, just pale blue, like frozen ice. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. He picked up the girl again and walked until he found a cave under the ridge. Not deep, but just enough to block the wind. He started a heat pack and placed her near it. She whispered something in her own language. It was weak, but he understood one word: hunt. Jason sat at the cave entrance, holding the blade. He didn't sleep. He just listened. The creature was still out there. It didn't attack because it was studying him just like he was studying it. But Jason wasn't afraid. He knew now that the hunt was not just about strength, it was about patience, silence, and smart choices. And no one was better at that than a human trained to survive the worst places in the galaxy. The snow whispered through the cave entrance, and Jason whispered, "Back, I see you." Jason sat near the mouth of the cave, listening to the storm rage outside. The snow never stopped. The wind howled like ghosts in pain, but he had learned to understand its rhythm. He listened for change as the slight pause, the soft crunch that didn't belong. Something was still out there, watching, waiting. But for now, he focused on the girl. She lay wrapped in heat foil, her skin still too cold, but her breathing was better. Her pale blue face twitched now and then as she slept. Jason had given her a few drops of warm water and a nutrient pack. She was Trellin, a race known for grace and agility, not endurance. How had she lasted out here alone? He leaned closer. Her clothes were worn and torn. There were old bruises on her arms. This girl hadn't just been part of a failed hunt. She had been left behind, abandoned, maybe as bait. He didn't like the idea, not one bit. Hours passed. Jason kept his blade ready and used one small heat lamp to keep them alive. At one point, the snow outside stopped for a few minutes, just long enough for him to step out and scan the area. He walked in a small circle, making sure no creature had left new tracks nearby. That's when he noticed something odd. Far ahead, a small blinking light in the snow. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he returned to the cave, covered the girl carefully, and whispered, "I'll be back." Jason moved quickly, but quietly. The snow was deep, but he had learned how to shift his weight to avoid sinking. He reached the light within minutes. It was another beacon, but not a distress signal. It was a decoy, meant to lure someone out. He looked around fast. That's when he saw it. A huge shape moving under the snow, like a submarine underwater. The white ground shifted, bulged, and then stopped. Jason drew his blade slowly. Then, silence. Nothing came out. It was a warning. Jason backed away, keeping his eyes on the snow. When he reached the cave again, the girl was awake, staring at him. Her big eyes were full of fear. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Still, she raised one hand and pointed outside. Jason nodded. "I know," he said gently. She whispered something in her language, and this time he understood a little more. Hunt, not beast. Hunt minds. Jason's eyes narrowed. The hunt wasn't just physical. Its creature wasn't just testing strength. It was testing thinking, planning. It wanted to see what kind of opponent he was. Maybe it had done this to hundreds of others before. But Jason was different. He didn't come here for fame or glory. He came here to understand. He watched the girl carefully. She looked scared, but not just because of the creature. She kept glancing at her wrista, Metal band was locked around it. Jason recognized it. A tracker. And not just for location, it was a life signal monitor. Her former team had used her as a living bait. They left her here to draw the creature out and maybe record its movements. Cold, heartless. Jason leaned closer and pressed a button on his wrist device. He sent out a strong pulse signal, a fake emergency call. He hoped whoever had left her was still listening. Within minutes, the response came. A coded message. Asset compromised. Do not extract. Engage cleanup protocol. Jason's face hardened. They were going to erase the girl. Not rescue. Not help. Just remove the proof. He shut off the device. Looked at her. Not today, he whispered. That night, Jason didn't sleep. He set traps around the cave. Simple things: tripwires made from thermal string, sharp rods placed under snow layers, and a pulse shock charge buried near the entrance. The girl watched, confused but curious. As he worked, he talked softly, telling her stories. About Earth. About survival. About how sometimes monsters weren't beasts, they were the ones who sent others to die. She listened. Her eyes followed him like a shadow. Slowly, the fear in them changed into something else. Hope. When the trap setup was done, Jason sat beside her again. She reached for his hand. Her fingers were still cold, but stronger than before. She said one word clearly. Why? Jason looked at her. Because you're not bait, he said quietly. You're a child, and you're not dying on my watch. Outside, the snow shifted again. This time, the creature did not hide. Its eyes glowed faintly through the mist, watching. The cave from a distance was curious. Studying Jason, trying to understand what made this human different from the others. Jason stared back. He didn't move. The wind screamed again, louder than before. But the human and the girl sat quietly, side by side. One had come to learn. The other had been left to die. Together, they were rewriting the rules of the hunt, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat, and deep in the blizzard. The real game had finally begun. Jason didn't waste time after that night. The message he received, engage cleanup protocol, was still burning in his mind. It meant someone, somewhere, was planning to kill the girl remotely. Whoever left her here didn't want her to survive. And if they realized she was still alive, they would try again. Jason knew what had to be done. He had to find shelter stronger than a cave. A place where he could hide her, protect her, and fight if needed. So, early in the morning, he packed up the supplies. The girl could now sit up, though she was still weak. Jason carried her on his back with a harness made from straps and cloth. He wrapped her tightly in layers and secured her against the wind. They moved east. Jason remembered spotting dark shapes in that direction, a possible ruin buried under snow. Old alien buildings, maybe. Somewhere solid. The storm wasn't kind. The wind roared, louder than before. Sharp ice crystals slapped his face. He kept one hand on his blade and one foot in front of the other. He walked for hours without stopping, each step slower than the last. The girl spoke only once during the whole walk. She said, "Something is watching." Jason nodded. He knew. He could feel it too. At last, they found it. A crumbled outpost buried halfway in the snow. It was ancient, long before the Galactic Council ever held their hunts here. The walls were made of dark metal, and strange symbols were carved into the stone. Jason broke through a frozen entrance using a heat drill and carried the girl inside. It was dark and silent. The air inside was stale, but warmer than outside. The roof had collapsed in one section, letting in faint white light. Jason set the girl down, wrapped her in heat packs, and started exploring. He moved from room to room, clearing ice and checking every shadow. Some rooms were still intact. There were broken machines, empty containers, and signs of an old battle burn marks. Deep claw slashes and dried alien blood. One room caught his eye. It was a weapons chamber. Most of the gear was useless, rusted, or frozen solid. But near the back, something strange stood tall, a large bone, sharpened at the end, hanging from chains. Jason stepped closer and realized it wasn't a weapon. It was the jawbone of a massive creature. Not just any creature. The same kind of beast that attacked his tent. The same pattern of teeth. The same curve of the bite. Jason stared at the bone for a long time. Then he looked down and saw more bones, half buried in the ice floor. An entire skeleton, twisted and long. It had 6 limbs, sharp claws, and armor-like skin. But it wasn't just a monster. It was part of the hunt's history. This outpost wasn't built by humans. It wasn't even built by modern aliens. It was built by those who had tried to control the hunt. And failed. Jason took out his notebook and began sketching. The bone structure, the old claw marks, the blast patterns. He studied them all. Creature didn't kill for hunger. It killed with tactics. With speed, it left warning signs. It circled prey. It studied before striking. That meant it had intelligence, and it didn't act alone. Jason picked up a broken spear from the ground. It was made of some unknown black metal. He tested its weight, its edge. Then he attached the sharp end of the ancient bone to the spear with a piece of thermal wire. It was crude, but strong. Now he had something that could hurt the beast. He returned to the girl. She was asleep, her breathing steadier now. Jason sat beside her, thinking. If the creature was testing him, then it must be learning too. But Jason was not like the other hunters. He didn't rely on brute strength. He used knowledge, patience, and cleverness. He knew now that he had to become like the creature. Hunt. It the same way it hunted others, quietly, carefully, step by step. Suddenly, the metal wall shook. A loud thud echoed through the ruins. Jason stood up fast and grabbed the spear. Another thud. The girl woke up, eyes wide with fear. Jason whispered, "Stay here. Don't move." He stepped outside into the broken hallway. The wind was still howling through the roof. Snow blew in. Shadows danced. Then nothing. He moved toward the sound, carefully. Then he saw it. Claw marks, fresh ones, across the metal wall. Deep, still glowing with heat. The creature had been here, watching him, testing him again. Jason didn't run. He pressed his hand against the claw marks. They were warm. That meant the creature had been here only seconds ago. But it didn't attack. It left a message. A challenge. Jason smiled slightly. He whispered to himself, "You're not the only hunter now." He turned back to the girl and walked into the ruins' main room. Spear in hand, heart steady. The creature had dominated this land for years. But something had changed. The human had come. And this time, he was ready to hunt back. The wind outside screamed like a dying creature. But inside the broken outpost, Jason moved quietly. He knew the beast had been near just moments ago. The claw marks were still fresh on the wall. It had come close. Maybe watched him while he fixed the spear, maybe even walked around while he slept for a moment. Jason could feel its eyes still watching, even now. He looked down at the girl. She was still sleeping, but she held the corner of the heat blanket tightly in her hands. Her body was warmer now. Her color had returned slightly. Jason had bought her more time, but the creature would take it all away if he wasn't ready. He didn't want to wait anymore. He was done hiding. Jason stepped outside. The broken wall of the outpost and into the snow. It hit his face like tiny needles. The storm was less wild now, but the air was thick with danger. He took a deep breath, held his spear tightly, and moved forward. He didn't walk like a soldier. He walked like a hunter. Every step was slow, quiet. His eyes searched the snow for signs, disturbed ice, prints, claw trails, and then he saw them. Circles in the snow. Not full footprints, just the edges. The beast had moved in circles around the ruin. Watching from every side, Jason crouched and touched the snow, still warm under the surface. That meant it was near. He reached into his pack and pulled out one of his last working gadgets, a heat sensor disc. He tossed it into the snow a few meters away. It beeped softly, scanning. Then it flashed red dot movement. Jason moved quickly. He dropped behind a rock, held his breath, and waited, and then it came. The creature stepped out of the storm, like a ghost. It was bigger than he expected. Its long arms dragged across the snow. Its skin was thick and gray, with a shine like frozen stone. The eyes were narrow, glowing faint blue, and its jaw was filled with sharp teeth, too many for a normal predator. But it didn't rush him. It looked at the sensor first, tilting its head. Then it looked at the rock Jason was hiding behind. It knew. Jason didn't wait. He jumped out and threw a flash flare. The bright light burst in front of the beast's eyes. It roared and turned its head, blinded. Jason rushed forward and stabbed his spear deep into its side. The bone tip sank into the creature's skin, but not far enough. It screamed and twisted, swinging one massive arm. Jason ducked, but the blow caught his side and sent him rolling. Across the snow, his ribs burned with pain, but he got up fast. The beast pulled the spear out and threw it aside. Blood thick and dark dripped from the wound. It wasn't badly hurt, but it was hurt. That mattered. It had never been hurt before. Now, it backed away, watching him differently. Not like prey, but like a rival. Jason picked up the spear again and stood straight. He didn't move. He just stared back at the creature. A standoff. The wind howled between them. The beast took a step forward. Jason didn't flinch. Another step. Jason raised the spear slightly. His feet stayed firm in the snow. Then the creature stopped. It let out a growl, not of anger, but confusion. It didn't understand this human. Others had screamed, run, fallen on their knees. This one fought back, heard it, stared it down without fear that made Jason dangerous. The creature turned and vanished into the storm again. Jason didn't chase it. He knew it wasn't over. This was just the first real fight. He had passed the first test. He picked up the broken flare and walked back to the ruin. His side ached and blood ran down his coat, but he didn't care. He made it. He lived on side. The girl sat up, her eyes wide. She had heard everything. Jason sat beside her, wiped his face, and smiled weakly. It's not unstoppable, he said, breathing hard. It bleeds. She nodded slowly, still shaking. Jason knew he couldn't beat it with strength. He would need traps, tricks, and he had to heal. But now, he had something powerful: hope. The creature had always been the hunter, but now, it had been hunted. Jason rested for a few minutes, then began drawing in his notebook again. He sketched the creature's shape, its eyes, the way it moved. Every detail mattered. He had learned more in those few minutes of battle than others had in years, and as he drew, he made a plan. The next time the creature came, it would not be just a fight, it would be war, and the human would be ready. Jason sat on the cold floor of the ruined outpost, holding his side with one hand and the spear with the other. His ribs hurt badly, but he was alive. The girl sat close to him, quiet, her eyes still wide from what she had heard outside. The battle was short, but powerful. He had faced the creature and lived. More than that, he had wounded it. That alone was a message to the galaxy. He looked around the broken room. The place was old, but still strong enough to hide in. He needed more time to heal and prepare. The girl handed him a water pack. He drank slowly. Then he stood, despite the pain, and began moving supplies into one side of the room. If another attack came, they needed space and defense. Jason started to build something. He took the sharp bone from the creature and used it as a support beam. He connected heat cells to wires, buried them under the snow inside the ruin, and created a trap. If the creature came close again, the sensors would trigger a blast. Not enough to kill, but enough to slow it down. The girl watched him work. She spoke little, but her eyes followed his every move. She pointed at things he forgot, handed him tools before he asked. She wasn't just recovering, she was learning. Hours passed. Jason finished setting up 3 traps, covered them with snow, and turned on the motion sensor. Now he had at least one line of defense, but he wasn't done. He climbed the highest part of the ruined structure. The roof was broken, but it gave him a clear view of the storm outside. Snow blew across the land, like smoke. Nothing moved, but Jason didn't trust that. He pulled a flare from his jacket. It wasn't just a signal. This one had a special Codan emergency beacon linked to the galactic network. He aimed it into the sky and fired. The red light exploded into the clouds. Like a tiny sun now the galaxy would see. Jason sat there in the freezing wind, knowing the message would reach thousands. Not words, not stories, just proof. A human had survived the hunt. He didn't know if it would bring help or more danger. Maybe some alien warrior would come, looking to prove they were stronger. Maybe the council would try to cover it up. Maybe the ones who left the girl would send ships to destroy them both, but he didn't care. The truth was out now, back inside the ruin. The girl was holding a broken piece of glass. She had scratched a picture into the wall. It showed a small figure facing a large creature with stars above them. Jason smiled when he saw it. He sat beside her and said, "That's me, huh?" She nodded. Then she pointed at the door. Jason stood quickly. He felt it too. A presence. He looked out again. This time, he saw not one but 2 shapes in the storm. The creature had returned, and it brought a friend. Jason's heart beat faster. The traps were set, but 2 beasts were a different story. He rushed to the control pad near the entrance and powered up the first defense line. A soft hum filled the room as the heat sensors went active. He grabbed his spear, pulled the girl behind a broken wall, and whispered, "Stay quiet." The snow outside stopped falling for a moment. A silence too perfect. Then the trap activated. A loud crack filled the air. The ground shook. One of the creatures had triggered the sensor. A burst of heat and light exploded under its feet. A roar followed. Jason peered out. One of them was down, limping, smoke rising from its side. But the other was still moving fast, too fast. Jason waited until it came close. Then he threw a second flare. Not into the sky, this one hit the snow just in front of the beast. It burst with fire and sound. The creature stumbled, confused. That's when Jason rushed forward. He struck with the spear, aiming for the eyes. But the creature was quicker this time. It knocked him backward with its tail. He flew into the snow, pain shooting through his back. His weapon fell from his hand. He looked up. The creature stood over him. Then something unexpected happened. The ground beneath them cracked. A hidden charge, Jason's last backup trap, exploded with a deep, shaking boom. The beast screamed. The shockwave sent ice flying in every direction. Jason covered his face. When he opened his eyes, the creature was gone, thrown off the ledge and into the deep snow below. He limped back to the ruin. Coughing, bleeding, the girl ran to him, helped him inside, and closed the broken door with all her strength. Jason lay on the floor, breathing hard. His hand reached into his coat. He pressed a small button far below the ruin. Deep in the snow, a fusion core hidden hours ago started its final countdown. It was buried in the ground, sealed and protected. A last resort. Jason looked at the girl and whispered, "If they come again, this whole place will go up. No more hunt." She didn't speak, but she nodded. She understood. Jason closed his eyes and rested. The fire was lit. Now the final storm was coming. And this time, the human would face it with everything he had. Jason lay on the cold floor, breathing slowly. His body was tired, bleeding, and bruised. His ribs felt like they were cracked. Every breath hurt, but he was still alive. He had survived another attack. And now the fusion core hidden under the snow was counting down. It was his last weapon, his last hope. He turned his head slightly to look at the girl beside him. She was watching him closely. Her small hands were shaking, but her eyes were full of something stronger than fear-trust. She believed in him. She had no one else. Jason knew what was coming. The creatures would return. This time, they would come together. They had learned from their wounds. They had learned from his traps. Jason had survived so far, but now the final fight was near. He needed to act fast. He stood up slowly, using the wall for support. His breath came out in clouds. The storm outside had gone quiet. Too quiet. That meant they were close. He reached into his bag and pulled out the last flare one that wasn't made for rescue, but for warning. It was bright green. Rare, it meant danger. High threat. He lit it and placed it near the door. Its glow filled the room, casting long shadows on the wall. Then he picked up the broken spear, tied it with a metal wire, and held it tight. He turned to the girl. "If I don't come back," he said, voice rough and slow, "you run. Head east. There's an old crash site, shelter, maybe food. Don't wait for me." The girl looked down. Then she surprised him. She spoke, not in her language, but in his. "No, I stay." Jason blinked. It was the first time she had said a full sentence in English. He almost smiled. But then the door shook. Boom, snow fell from the roof. Boom, the metal bent inward. They were here. Jason stepped in front of the girl and faced the door. Boom. The door exploded inward as a massive beast slammed through it. Behind it came another larger, with red scars down its side. The one Jason had wounded. The leader. Jason ran forward. Throwing his spear, it struck the first creature in the shoulder, making it roar in pain. But the second one ignored the weapon and came straight for him. He rolled to the side as the beast charged, crashing into a wall. Jason grabbed a metal rod from the ground and hit it hard in the leg. It roared again, but this time it didn't swing blindly. It turned fast and its tail whipped around. It struck Jason across the back and sent him flying into a pile of broken crates. Pain filled his body. He gasped, blood in his mouth, but he didn't stop. He stood again. The creatures came at him together now, one from each side. Jason didn't move back. He stepped forward and grabbed the glowing flare from the ground. The green fire burned in his hand. He threw it at their faces. The burst of green light blinded them for a second. It was all he needed. He jumped between them and rolled under their legs, grabbing his broken spear as he moved. Then he ran toward the center of the ruin, toward the trap, the fusion core. He pressed the final button on his wrist. The timer sped up. 1 minute. The creatures followed. Jason shouted to the girl, "Now, run." But she didn't run. She ran to him. He turned in shock. "What are you doing?" She held up a small control panel, the one he had left near her pack. She had added a delay button. I started, she said, her voice shaking. You. Escape. Jason's heart pounded. No, he said. We leave together. He grabbed her hand and pulled her close. The beasts were coming. Fast. They roared in rage. The ruin shook. Jason ran with her toward the exit, through the smoke and falling snow. The girl stumbled once, but he didn't let go. Behind them, the creatures howled and charged. 10 seconds. Jason reached the outer wall and jumped down the slope, shielding the girl with his body. 5 seconds, they hit the snow hard and rolled. Then dash, boom. Fusion core exploded. The ground shook like thunder. Fire burst into the sky. The old ruin was torn apart, blasted into dust and flame. A wave of heat swept across the snow. The storm itself seemed to stop. Then, silence. Jason lay in the snow, his body still. For a moment, everything was white. Then he opened his eyes. The girl was beside him. Alive. They had made it. He sat up slowly, his back burning with pain. The ruins were gone. The beasts were gone. Only snow and silence remained. Jason stood, holding the girl close. No more hiding, no more fear. The hunt was over. The human had survived. And the storm finally knew what it meant to face something that never gave up.